Hi everyone, I'm Zach with the Money Channel, and I think it's best that we dive into it. As an overview, 10 things to remember in content management and social media. If you've eclipsed 3 years as a content manager or social media manager, here are 10 things to keep in mind. Do not rely on generic Canva templates, be aware of your brand color palette, look past page 1 of iStock, Pexels, etc., use ChatGPT to generate new ideas, learn Photoshop, continue learning for 2 hours per week, leverage freelancers and Fiverr, explore Midjourney and generative AI, be BFFs with your sales team, recycle winning content. This thread got some backlash, but I think it is good for newbies in content marketing and social media. You'll see what I'm talking about in the replies here. ChatGPT is surprisingly helpful when I'm staring at a blank page. I use it all the time to get me started on copy. Same, it's become a regular part of my workflow. Wouldn't those all be good tips for a new hire? Why wait 3 years? You absolutely could throw these at a new hire. However, learning Photoshop immediately isn't necessary because you can be totally efficient in Canva until you're asked to send layered files. Also, mastering Midjourney or another generative AI tool is extracurricular and can be time consuming. That was the reasoning, but again, tips you can absolutely throw at someone new. Depending on the size of your company and other specifics, are you a one-person team? I would scratch number 1 somewhat. Canva templates are extremely useful for fast throwaway stuff, only requires a little bit of work to tweak them and plug them into your own branding, colors, etc. I used to be hardcore dedicated to making everything by hand, but when you're a one-man team, you have to throw that out the window usually. I only spend significant time designing from scratch when it's something that warrants the time. The vast majority of social media marketing for a lot of small businesses is just filler anyway to +8 boxes, employees, and keep the algorithm happy. Yep, one-person team here and at a mid-sized company. Don't get me wrong, I leverage Canva for throwaway content and or shared content with users who do not have access to Photoshop. And of course, I have all the brand colors and fonts loaded, so something simple is very quick. However, I personally steer clear of Canva for more robust campaigns, especially when print materials will be needed. I love that you have the small business filler perspective because this is essentially what I'm referring to. At the end of the day, start building on a portfolio for yourself with unique content. That's the point behind the tip. Reading the brand standards is almost obligatory for customers. If they are not produced, then there is a whole different issue at play here that extends beyond simple content marketing. Agreed, yet you see examples of small and medium-sized businesses with small marketing teams or one-person marketing teams continually failing to maintain brand standards. Then we have a pretty direct comment here, this is not helpful. And I somewhat agree with this in a way. I think it's not great for someone who's 3 years into marketing. I think anyone who is serious about marketing really should have known all this by now, but I think it's good for starters for sure, and others in the thread say, in my opinion, it's really helpful. Photoshop and the color palette are essentials. Using Canva was never an option. If it doesn't help you, it will help someone else working to advance their career in marketing. And based on the downvotes, others clearly don't agree. How so? These are not even full sentences. You provide no further context for any of your points. Why should people learn Photoshop and not use Canva? This is terrible advice. Not everyone has an inclination to design, and Canva is a great time saver, especially if you already have strong brand guidelines implemented. And being aware of your brand's color palette is something that every marketer needs to know from day one anyway. The brand guidelines are basically required reading it. If they aren't made, that's a whole other thing that goes beyond just context marketing. How exactly are people expected to leverage freelancers and Fiverr? That's assuming people know how to vet and screen candidates accordingly. Context: this is not a blog or article, it's a list of tips to research further on your own, not a guide to mastering a digital marketing strategy. The purpose is to promote a few ideas someone less experienced may not have thought of, which I personally do agree with, but again, I wouldn't say that 3 years is less experienced, especially in a social media age where someone like myself who's in their early 20s really should know all this already. Many businesses are not implementing branding best practices whatsoever, so you shouldn't assume that's a day one priority. As a content marketer, you should be aware that color palettes exist, especially if you're new to the field and are just getting your feet wet. Also, how will you learn how to screen freelancers if you've never attempted it before? You educate yourself, and if you're not offered any assistance by your employer, there are hundreds of resources available for free. Not everyone is a graphic designer, true, and not everyone has access to the graphic designers on your team. Some people will be able to learn beyond Canva and create unique designs. Canva is a huge time saver, just like ChatGPT, but it's getting easier and easier to spot generic templates all over the digital space. The important thing is to make it your own. What sales team? I'm the sales team, cries in startup. I hear you. Job title: marketing manager. Job description: perform duties of marketing director, creative director, business development manager, and sales manager salary range 50 to 60,000. This is some empty advice. And why specifically 3 years? I'm 7+ years of experience and most of this is beginner advice. Also, Canva for Life, it's too damn easy to use versus others. Beginner advice often still applies to senior positions, especially on small teams. It may be empty for you with 7+ years of experience, but there may be others who try something new in the workflow, stumbling over a few of these points. Plus, ChatGPT and Midjourney or something like Notion are becoming more and more prevalent, and they're very new and quickly evolving. Years of experience only goes so far. After 3 years, that's where I really caught my stride as a content manager and digital marketer, learned how to be more efficient, learned what I was doing wrong or wasn't aware of. It's easy to forget simple things like allotting time for self-education because you're too busy, even after 5 or 10 years of experience. It boils down to consistency and repetition, which over time makes your brand and branded content immediately recognizable, but it isn't forever. Eventually, you'll either do a brand refresh or rebrand and align to a new standard. I wouldn't even consider myself professional enough to take on a role as such, and I still refuse to use Canva and any other sort of template. I wouldn't dismiss it so quickly. I work in graphic design professionally, and I make lots of Canva templates for clients since it allows them to make adjustments to text and thus reuse designs I've made for them. Illustrator and Photoshop are extremely powerful, but your target audience for your content won't care what program you use as long as it looks good. Well, if you're the one making the template, that's a whole different story. I was just thinking this post-referenced pre-made templates advertised on Canva. You understood what I was saying. When I see competitors using the same social templates, it hurts my head. The agency scenario is a completely different story though. As someone who used to work at the BBC, this post I think would actually work on some people, in as much as larger companies oftentimes seem to have more legroom for professionals who aren't as forward thinking, and I'm going to say it like it is there. That's just from my own experience. As someone who is now self-employed, you have to have known all this stuff within a few weeks, if not at least within a year, but not 3 years. I think the OP gave a good reading as to what a marketer should know, but yeah, as a self-employed person, this is all stuff that if you're taking 3 years, you're out of a job.